Welcome back, baseball fans, to the 1971-74 Carryover League draft results for the third round draft results. Starting with Philadelphia. And they would go into the year of 1972 and add a couple guys they had protection on. Tony Taylor, nice little 303 hitter, 749 OPS, could play second, third. You know, he's a rotating piece in there with Boa and Harmon and Denny Doyle and Mike Schmidt. But the good news is there was no DH in the National League back then. Well, now Tony Taylor could be a pretty darn good hitting one at least. And they also added Johnny Callison in the same year as a corner outfielder. Getting up there in years, he's 33, but he still brings that great throwing arm, good defense, and, you know, a left-handed power hitter in a platoon. Just going to find somebody to play right field against lefties. That's what they're going to need. All right, Kansas City. They went into the year of 73. Just took one player. They took Horacio Pena. Nice reliever that they've held on to now for several years because he's pretty darn good. 2.76 ERA. Very good against righties. He and Doug Bird will be the right-handed portion of that Kansas City bullpen this year. And next up is the Padres. They finally added some older players. So after adding Grubb, Fry-Slavin, and Sprague, the kids from 73 and 74, they went back to the year of 72 and brought their outfield back. Cito, at least two-thirds of it. Cito Gaston and Ollie Brown, both 28 years old. Both corner outfielders with good throwing arms. Gaston both guys had bad 1971s after great 1970s. So they back and forth, and they're good again in 72. So Gaston will be in left, Grubb will be in center, Brown will be in right field. All right, the New York Yankees, they selected Roy White. Did they get two guys? Yeah, they added Roy White and Fritz Peterson. 27-year-old Roy White has an 857 OPS. He can still steal bases at 19 homers. And Fritz Peterson's 29 years old, has a nice season with a 3.05 ERA. Smart move for the Yankees. They got a nice rotation. They have Medich and Stottlemyre, Fritz Peterson, and McAndrew. So they're doing pretty well pitching. The Expos finally took Rusty Staub, that's great news for the Expos if they could wait to the third round, best player available, because he really is only the third best player in this draft this year. He has a 311 hitter with an 874 OPS. So they waited to the third round to cash him in. They already added Singleton, Jorgensen, and Dale Murray and Bob Bailey. And they also, they added another catcher, John Bateman, a 30-year-old catcher with a decent throwing arm. And he had 526 plate appearances for the Expos in 71, so they decided to add him. They'll probably add another catcher in this draft somewhere. Next up, your Chicago Cubs. And they had a little fun this time. They went into the 1973 box, and they decided to add the Carmen Fun Zone. Yes, the Carmen Fun Zone is happening in Wrigley Field this summer. Check it out, kids. He is a 273 hitter, but a nice 357, 440, 797 OPS. Nice card. Easily his best performance in 172 plate appearances. They'll put him all over the place as a utility player, sometimes DH. And they also added, from the same year, Randy Hundley, who they had the rights to. He'll bring back a -2 arm, and he's still hitting 226. They don't really care about his bat anymore, but they're glad they want his arm because Lou Brock is in this division, so they're going to need a catcher. So, yeah. And we go to Seattle. Seattle decided to find a guy on waivers to play second base, and they found Jim LaFay. He was with the White Sox last year. They let him go because they were going to bring in George Orta to play second. But Jim LaFay is a very interesting switch-hitting second base, third base guy with power from both sides, had 12 homers and 388 at-bats. 384 slugging for a second baseman. That's not too bad. Not bad at all. Discarded from another franchise and will be a nice little piece in Seattle's infield along with Danny Thompson. And of course they added Bill North. And with LaFay, they also added a lefty reliever, Luke Walker. 10-8 with a 3.55 ERA. Did that with the 71 Pirates, who would have won the World Series. All right, Portland. Finally, the beneficiaries of the latest Frank Robinson move. So, historically, Frank Robinson, we know, went from Cincinnati to Baltimore. Then he played for the Dodgers. Then he played for the Angels. Then he played for the Indians, managed the Indians. So, it's not like the guy didn't have a suitcase. So, last year, he went from Baltimore to Cleveland. And then Cleveland decided to double up in a trade and get even more productive players. As Frank Robinson is now 35 years old, so they sent him out to Portland. And Portland's like, oh, we got a star. We don't care if his numbers are declining. He's still hitting .281 with 28 home runs and an .894 OPS. It's probably his last productive year in 71. Portland had another guy. They also added Billy Canigliaro, a guy who could play some center field for them. And they got a pretty interesting outfield. They have Rich Coggins, Bernie Carbo, Frank Robinson, and Billy Canigliaro. Fun little outfield for this team. Plus they got a 300 hitting Bob Montgomery and an almost 300 hitting Tommy McCraw. So Portland's really getting some sticks here in this draft. All right, Baltimore. After Frank Robinson, that's kind of funny, was drafted right before them, Baltimore finally cashes in the Brooks Robinson Boog Powell chips. Clearly not as good as Jim Palmer and Bobby Grich by this point. Brooksy's 34 years old. Boog Powell is only 29, but his numbers start to go down, dip a bit. Both from the 71 World Series year. Brooksy hits 20 home runs, and Boog Powell hits 22, and he's got a good glove at first base and a lot of walks. So probably Boog Powell's last good year in Baltimore before he has an end-of-career season in 75 that's noteworthy. And probably Brooksy's last year with any kind of power in 71. All right, Florida Marlins. They took a nice, valuable utility player, Marty Martinez. He can play more positions than this. They just don't fit him into this column. It's not thick enough. He can play second, third, short. He can also catch and play the outfield. Utility player, probably play a lot of shortstop for the Florida Marlins. I believe they would have doubled up with Roger Repos. Roger Repos turned it on in the Winter Baseball Classic as a corner outfielder with plenty of power both ways, even though he hit 199. He's a 199 batting average, but you add to that a 333 on-base percentage, which actually is very respectable for a 199 hitter. A 707 OPS. So probably one of the best 199 hitters in baseball history, Roger Repos. Plus he's a 2-E1 with a -1 arm in right field. Two pretty nice players for a Florida team that is destined for 4th place in the very tough National League East. Next up, the California Angels. And they turned in their Cesar Tovar card. He also tore it up in the Winter Baseball Classic. 718 plate appearances. Did that with the Twins. Now he's doing it with the Angels. His versatility is kind of limited from what it used to be. He can't play third anymore, but they don't need him to play third. They want him to play center. They're going to move Jay Johnston over to right. They'll have Mickey Rivers and Don Baylor in left. So the Angels do okay. And Angels are based on pitching. And they also added from 71 Jim Spencer. And this was a very interesting debate going, which year for Jim Spencer do we take? And we took this year. It's his lowest batting average in the 4-year sample at 237, but it's the most power, 18 homers and a 392 OP slugging. So, and of course he's a 185 first baseman. So Jim Spencer, he can also hit both lefties and righties. And yeah, they like the power. So that's why I went with the 24-year-old Jim Spencer here. Last year, before I think he gets traded to the Texas Rangers and then later on the White Sox and the Yankees in this decade. All right, the Ohio expansion team. Oh, they had some fun here. They went into the 1973 box and they found a switch-hitting base stealer by the name of Larry Lintz, 23 years old. Plays second and short. He's going to be playing short for this team. A 250 batting average, but a 351 on base. And he had how many stolen bases? He stole 12 of 16. They made him an ace stealer. And next year he'll be a double A stealer. So they sort of like the Herb Washington or the you know, the speedy Oakland pinch runner kind of player. And Ohio is going to use this player in that role at the top of the lineup. Somebody to get on base. That's about it. That's all he really offers. All right, next up, the Giants. This round, they finally did a smart thing. So if you recall, they ended up trading Sam McDowell after drafting him to the Brewers, which opened up a spot in the year of 1974 to get a left-handed pitcher to replace Sam McDowell, and that's what they did. This was a great move. Finally, clever stuff. Remember I was saying that the Giants, they can't squander their young farm system, and they already did. They lost Gary Maddox. They were sleeping at the wheel. He lost his protection, and the Phillies stole him for nothing. And they weren't going to lose these guys as well, even though it's 74. So they took a couple of pitchers. Mike Caldwell, 2.95 ERA, 14-5. They'll plug him into Sam McDowell's spot. 3 years younger, more control than McDowell. And Charlie Williams will go into that bullpen, 2.78 ERA, 39 games with 7 starts, 100 innings. And 2 good pitchers with ERAs below 3 for the Giants in the year of 74. So they did get younger, at least there, while holding on to old guys, Willie McCovey and Dick Dietz. All right, next up, the Tigers. And the Tigers, they went into the 1974 and say, we got Willie Horton, but let's make Willie Horton frightening to the rest of baseball. And so they did. They improved Willie Horton to his 74 card. He didn't play a full season. It didn't really matter. The guy had 891 OPS, crushes left-handed pitchers too with home runs. 298, 361, 529 slugging, 891 OPS. So that cost them a draft pick to improve a player they already had. But they, in 74, they also had the rights to a young shortstop, Tom Verizor. He will be the new Tiger shortstop because they decided not to go with Ed Brinkman and Aurelio Rodriguez. They decided we didn't want to do defense. We want to do something else besides defense at short and third. And Verizor actually has some pop. He's got a 382 slugging. A lot of home runs on the right side of his card. So that's good news for that Tom Verizor. They still need to get a third baseman later in this draft. All right, next up, the Colorado Rockies. And the Rockies decided to double up as well with 2 guys. We're seeing a lot of 1971 guys in the third round of this draft, as the glow of the rookie class started to subside a little bit. Now the teams are just punching keepers. You see a lot more K keepers in the years of 71. You know, Tovar and McDowell and Al Kaline. Jack Hyatt is a catcher with a nice on-base percentage. 401 on base, 752 OPS. He'll share catching duties. And also from the year of 71, they found as the reliever Ron Klimkowski. He's pretty good. He's got a 3.38 ERA in 45 innings, joining Jim Merritt in the bullpen along with Mel Queen and some other guy, I can't remember. But it's the Rockies, and yeah. Okay. Next up, Arizona Diamondbacks. They made a nice pick. After grabbing Retman and Jeff Zahn, in the year of 72, another Giant got away. Remember I said the Giants got to protect their young guys? They didn't. They lost Gary Maddox, and now the Arizona Diamondbacks just took Steve Stone out of the Giants farm system. And it's Steve Stone's best of the 4 years here, 71 to 74, with a 2.98 ERA in 123 innings. 24 years old, Steve Stone. Eventually he'll go to the White Sox and then Baltimore. And I don't think he'll do any better than this, 2.98 ERA. Of course, 1980, he will win 25 games. But even in that year, his ERA is higher than this 2.98. So did they get anybody else in the 72? Yeah, they added Ed Herman. Easy Ed Herman, former White Sox catcher, 25 years old. Boy, he's got a throwing arm in this 1 year, which is very weird. Then he turns back into a 0 or +2 arm catcher, but he's got a -3 arm in 72. Still as a left-handed bat, a slugger, slow-footed slugger type, 692 OPS for Ed Herman on Arizona. Next up, the Texas Rangers. And they, guess what, folks? They took a player out of the Giants farm system. That's what I'm saying. They took Dave Rader. My goodness. Dave Rader, nice left-handed batter. 23 years old, -2 arm catcher, 259. He's definitely good against righties in this year. And he'll have a nice decade. Mostly as a platoon catcher. Nice pickup for the Rangers until Jim Sundberg arrives, which won't be for another couple of years. But they'll have Dave Rader and a platoon with, I believe, Dave Duncan on Texas. That's a nice pick. All right, the Pirates. So the 4 big guys from their World Series year of 71 and 72 are all already at it. The Clemente, Al Oliver, Sanguin, and Bob Robertson. So they went to youth. They went to 74, and you know what? They would have preferred Dave Parker, the Cobra, but they got no room for him as long as Roberto Clemente gets to extend his stay after his tragedy. He can play all the way through to the 72, 73, 74, 75 league, which is next year. So we'll have Roberto Clemente one more year, and once his career will come to an end, we'll bring up Dave Parker to replace him. But until that, the other rookie in their system was this kid named Frank Tavares, shortstop, 24 years old. He's got a little bit of on base with him, a definite base stealer. Could probably bat 9th and steal bases, like wrapping around to the top of the lineup. The shortstop will be the weakest position on this team, and they'll most likely bring Gene Alley back to caddy for him. So Alley and Tavares will probably platoon at short for the Pirates, assuming nobody else takes Gene Alley in the draft. St. Louis Cardinals, they traded Julian Javier to the Dodgers for Ted Sizemore in the offseason, and they have Ted Sizemore. 264 hitter, 3 E21, second baseman. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, not much of a lot. But he's a C-stealer, he can bunt, he can hit and run. He's okay. He's a decent second baseman. Kind of a sideways move from Javier, who's basically younger. I think Javier's like 35, Sizemore's only 27. And in 72, that's the only move they made. All right, Toronto Blue Jays. They went into the year of 74 and added 2 more keepers. Carl Morton acquired in the offseason. Hey, 274 innings. Hey, look, these Blue Jays didn't have anybody who could pitch on 3 days rest a year ago. And in this draft, they added the 279 innings of Jerry Royce and the 274 innings of Carl Morton. Not bad. You know, not bad for a team that didn't even exist in this timeline. And they added Darrell Chaney, who is actually a pretty cool card. He's got a 327 on base and a switch hitter with a little bit of power. A left-handed batter. Actually, he's a switch hitter this year. Sometimes he's only left-handed. He's a switch hitter with a little bit of power and can play anywhere in the infield. He's their utility player. Nice little pickup for Darrell Chaney. All right. Las Vegas. If you've been following the last 2 rounds, we talked about the defense, and they do not let down, folks. They keep it going. In the year of 71, they acquired Wes Parker in the offseason from the Dodgers because the Dodgers were going to move Steve Garvey to first. Wes Parker's only 31 years old, so it's not like, he's about to retire, and they could keep him going a little bit longer. He's a 1E5 at first, joining a 1E13 at third and a 1E8 at short for the best defensive infield in baseball, which is in Las Vegas suddenly. Unbelievable. Unfortunately, Wes Parker only had 6 home runs at first base and hit 274. So Vegas has added 274, 254, 222, and 203 batting averages to their team with all this great defense. Hopefully it will pan out. We'll see. They also added Ray Culp in the rotation. Good year with Boston. 242 innings for the Red Sox, 360 ERA. Nice little pitcher the last few years. Milwaukee Brewers in the year of 71 again. This is the 3rd or 4th, 4 out of 5 years we're going 71 here. They brought their closer back, Ken Sanders. His ERA again is below 2. I think 69, 70, and 71. Might want to look that up. His ERA is below 2. Ken Sanders, 29 years old. What a great run for him. Dominant closer. 136 innings. Yeah, outstanding pitcher. But then he kind of, I guess, arm fatigue. He's pretty much out of the game by the time he turns 30, which is a shame. And who else did they add? Oh, they added Fregosi. They had Robin Yount. So now they have Yount and Fregosi manning shortstop. You know, Fregosi, the veteran, in case the rookie stumbles, kind of thing. Fregosi has a little bit of power where Yount does not. So Fregosi's just kind of a protection for Yount at this point. Atlanta Braves added a couple pitchers. They had a Mo Drabowski, 35 years old. Old Mo can still deal 60 innings, 3.43 ERA in the bullpen. Mo Drabowski. And they also added Mike McQueen, the now 20-year-old pitcher. We had his card 1970 as a 19-year-old, did okay. As a 20-year-old, he has his best year in a very abbreviated career. He's got a 3.54 ERA in 56 innings. And suddenly, Atlanta, you know, after landing Davey Johnson, they decided to go for that pitching. They went Tom House, Buzz Capra, Mo Drabowski, Mike McQueen. They're trying to build a pitching staff to support that incredible offense they have down in Atlanta. And that will be fun to see. Can Atlanta pull it off? Can they make the playoffs in an era when they didn't? I think they're going to be a tough team in the National League. Look out for the Atlanta Braves. Atlanta Braves and Chicago White Sox, two teams that do not have a playoff appearance in this timeline. Watch out, folks. That would be a wild World Series, but yeah, I like both those teams' rosters. Next up, the Minnesota Twins. And they went with their history. The guys from the 65 series still kicking around. You got Harmon Killebrew at age 35. His last productive year, 28 home runs, 114 walks, and 119 RBI, and an 850 OPS. And also, at that similar age, 34-year-old Stan Williams back to the bullpen one more time. Letting these guys run it back. They put Peronowski in waivers. They might actually go select him off of waivers just to keep the old band back together. Minnesota's very, very, very old. And they're just running this back until the wheels fall off the cart. Stan Williams, 4.15 ERA in 78 innings. Clearly not as good as that 1.90 ERA he had in 1970. Next up, the Clevetown Indians. And they took 72 Veda Pinson, 33 years old. One-time teammate of Frank Robinson. And they were teammates again in Cleveland a year ago after being teammates in Cincinnati in the previous decade. But 33-year-old Pinson can still play center field. He's a 3-1 E2 in center, a 275 hitter. Hits righties better than lefties. He'll be in center. They'll have Gamble in right, Lowenstein in left. Nice little pickup, Veda Pinson for the Cleveland Indians. All right, next up, the Houston Astros. Finally, they punched their 71 tickets. This is the last time that Joe Morgan will be in Houston for one more year, and then we'll do the migration to Cincinnati in the offseason. That should be interesting to figure out how that's going to work. 27-year-old Joe Morgan's last year in Houston, 689 plate appearances, 27 doubles, 11 triples, 13 homers, 40 stolen bases, 88 walks, but a 256 batting average, 757 OPS, and a 2E12 at second base. They must have thought he was going to fade when he turned 28, 29, 30. Instead, he becomes one of the most dynamic players in the National League in the 1970s for the Big Red Machine. But one more year in Houston for Joe Morgan, and I believe they also added Bob Johnson, now on his third team in 3 years. Big game Bob Johnson. Pitched for Texas, pitched for Kansas City, pitched for Pittsburgh, now he's pitching for Houston. 174 innings with Pittsburgh in 71 and a 3.45 ERA. I believe he would have gotten a World Series ring for those 71 Pirates, right? Bob Johnson. Unless he was in transit in one of his transactions. Boston Red Sox are being very careful, and they're not doubling up on picks until they want to see how the second half of this draft shakes out. So they just added just Rico Petrocelli. From 71, his best year, he's getting a little bit older. He's a 2.11 third baseman, 28 home runs, 815 OPS. It's not 1969 anymore, so it's a big come down from that, but still, he is an outstanding third baseman. 28 home runs and a 2.11. He joins Yastrzemski, Dwight Evans, and Rick Miller, and they didn't add any other players in the. They only doubled up once with Rick Miller, but they didn't double up in 73 or 71 because Tommy Harper, they have an option for him on either year, and they didn't want to commit to which year they're going to use yet. See what else is available on the board. And like I say, when you see two guys getting picked, that's because they definitely want those two guys. But most teams would rather just wait and see who's on the board when it's their time to draft in those later rounds. Selecting two guys at once just speeds the draft up. So that's why you pursue it in two different ways. All right, the Dodgers. Now, they caught a break. They caught a nice little break because remember we talked about the Giants losing guys? Steve Yeager could have been taken by any team in the last two drafts and was not. Steve Yeager just remained outside of the draft, and the Dodgers were crossing their fingers he'd still be around, and lo and behold, Steve Yeager is here. In the year of 72, which is interesting because it's a hitting year, not a catching year. Yeager's a 4+1 E16 catcher, which is very atypical for his decade in Dodger blue. But he hit 274, 374, 406, 780. So, nice stick for Yeager, and don't forget they have Joe Ferguson, minus one arm. They also have the rights to Tom Haller, a left-handed hitting catcher, but it looks like they've changed their mind. They're probably not going to keep Haller. That's the beauty of this draft. Just because you see the letter K for keeper, just because you designate you want to keep certain guys, when the draft plays out, you might not want to keep them anymore. So now it looks like the Dodgers are going to let Tom Haller test the market and either trade him or just cut him. So Steve Yeager, and one of their keepers, Claude Osteen, 32-year-old Osteen. His best year in this timeline is 72, 20-game winner, 2.64 ERA, and 252 innings. If you're wondering about the order the guys get picked in, it's BPA for the first 4 rounds. Garvey is number 1, Ferguson 2, Yeager 3. Osteen they just have the rights to him, so they can just announce him whenever they feel like announcing him, since they have the rights to the player. But he gets second billing to Steve Yeager in this instance. All right, the White Sox. They made an offseason deal to get a closer, and they got Jack Aker, and they punched his ticket. White Sox are filling their roster out. They're filling out what they need to do. They're checking off the boxes of what they have to do to replay the Oakland A's. And they're doing a nice job. They also took, besides Jack Aker, the 2.59 ERA in 55 innings, all in relief. Could be a setup man or a closer. They also selected a 71 Tom Egan, nice 25-year-old catcher who has some nice power. He's got a 410 slugging and a 730 OPS. He had 10 homers and 250 at-bats, and they're split into the platoon, so he can hit with power both sides. So the White Sox brought Aparicio back. They got the whole team here. They got Dick Allen, Tom Egan. They got Muser, Orta, Melton, Aparicio, Carlos May, the center fielder, Ken Henderson, Walt Williams, and Buddy Bradford. So they got a great offense, and they got Terry Forster closing games with Jack Ager, plus a brilliant pitching staff led by Wilbur Wood. So they've just, at this point of the draft, they only have utility spots left to fill. Great moves for the White Sox. The New York Mets. This has not been the greatest draft for the Mets. They took a very questionable Wayne Garrett in the last round as his defense is poor. And I hopefully he doesn't hurt the Mets pitching staff. But in this round, they took 31-year-old Jerry Grody in the year of 74. And this is the best combo of arm and bat. -2 arm is the highest arm in the 4 years for him, but the 257 is the second highest batting average for him. And to Jerry Grody in the year 74, they also added John Milner. 24-year-old John Milner, a 3/8 first base, left-handed batter. More importantly, a left-handed batter who can hit left-handed pitching, something that Ed Kranepool can't do. So the transition is underway. They have Kranepool and Milner, both players on this roster, but once Kranepool's season's over, they might just let him go and then just run with Milner. I think Milner's going to play first and Kranepool will be a DH. That's why they have 2 first basemen. Because, again, the National League didn't have a DH in this timeline, so they can go with 2 first basemen. One's a DH. Nice move for the Mets. All right, a couple more picks, and the round will be over. The Oaktown A's, oh boy. Oh, they didn't have another big bat, did they? Yeah, they did. Yeah, Oakland had another big bat. 71, Orlando Cepeda. Oh my goodness. 276, 330, 492 slugging, 822 OPS, 312 first baseman at age 33. Cepeda turns in decent years all the way till age 37. When he becomes a full-time DH in 74. But this 71 card was with the Braves. Surprise, surprise. And Oakland's got him now. And they have Mike Hegan at first base. And again, just like you saw up here with Milner and Kranepool, Oakland goes with 2 first basemen. One will be a DH. Mike Hegan and Orlando Cepeda. One guy will be a DH, one guy will be first base. And I think that's the only guy from 71 Oakland took. And last but not least, so the Cincinnati Reds did not draft a most valuable player in the 3rd round of the draft. Their string of drafting MVPs ended. But the string of Ring of Honor Cincinnati Reds continued. So after adding MVP Johnny Bench from 72 and MVP Pete Rose from 73, they added Tony Perez from 71. This is his last year at 3rd base. He only had 269, but he has a nice little 325 on base, a 438 slugging, 764 OPS. And his last year at 3rd, they have Lee May still at first base. The writing is on the wall. In the offseason, Tony Perez will move over to first base. Lee May will move to Houston, and Joe Morgan will move to Cincinnati. And so we're kind of preparing for that to happen. We needed to keep Perez at 3rd base for 1 more year at age 29. And that concludes the 3rd round of the draft. Thanks for checking this out, folks. We'll see you next time.